in stage 3, the CEO's span of control gets way out of line, okay? They have to delegate authority and responsibility. Easy to delegate responsibility, very much harder to delegate authority.
Welcome to Les's Corner. Here is Les Birch.
Hi, and welcome to Les's Corner. I'm Les Birch, president of Sashco Sealants, and we got some great episodes for you. We're going to be talking about the stages of growth in a company and how you can know what stage you're in. And you might think, well, our growth really and our challenges are going to be measured by the dollar volume. That's not true. So to help us explain that, we've got in our studio James Fischer. He is an author, a researcher, and a business consultant of over 35 years experience. And also Chad Tabeast. He's a business owner, and we're kind of using him today as our guinea pig. And so one of the things we're going to do is explain how you can navigate those stages of growth. And then our next episode, we're going to be talking about order and disorder. And that's a real fascinating subject. But let's get back to our stages. James, you did some really fundamental research and came up with what really guides the stages of growth for a company and how you navigate that. What is that?
Well, actually, Les, what I found over many years of research and working with hundreds and hundreds of companies, that to understand growth at a sort of a DNA level, you got to understand what makes the company complex as it grows. And managing that complexity is really where it's at. And the unit of complexity in any organization, doesn't matter what industry it's in, is a single human being. And as you add human beings to the organization, it becomes more complex. And as it becomes more complex, the rules change for managing that organization.
So you identified these stages by the number of people in the organization,
yeah,
right? Not the type of organization.
Nope.
So you're telling us that it didn't matter what the business was, you found the same patterns
yep.
in each stage of growth.
Yes.
And then you identified the number of people in each stage.
Right.
So let's start simple. Let's get into this easy. What would be the range of stage 1? How many people do you have in your organization in stage 1, and how do you characterize that?
Okay, so there's obviously a lot of stage 1 companies out there. They are 1 to 10 employees or staff members. And so as you grow the organization, like I mentioned, each person that you bring onto your company has a suitcase in their left hand with all the great things that are happening with them and the things that they're bringing to the table and their competencies and so forth and so on, all the positive stuff. And in the right hand, they're carrying a suitcase of things that may be stressing them out, problems they have at home, finances, whatever. When you bring someone on board, doesn't matter how great of hire they are, they come in with those 2 suitcases. And then when you start having people come together, each one carrying their own suitcase, they start bumping into each other. And so you're managing that complexity. It actually starts to clump and it becomes a critical mass. Every time you get, just as an example, the stage 1 company, I'm calling it now cycles, but for terms of my book, it's stage 1. You get to 7, 8, 9 employees. It starts to clump and gets a critical mass. And what happens is you add one more employee, that 11th employee, onto the 10th. Something very odd, strange happens, is the rules change.
So if you're a stage 1, let's say you're a contractor.
Yes.
So many of the remodeling companies are small companies, they're 6 to 10 people.
Okay.
What are the things you have to do well to be successful in stage 1?
Okay. And I would say this probably happens with every human group that size, and we can talk about this later. But what you have to do first is you have to organize the work. And if you don't organize the work, then what happens is you're constantly trying to assign to fit people, the work to the people. You don't want to do that. In stage 1, you organize the work first, and then you organize the people doing it.
So are these kind of things like as simple as, hey, organize the truck that the crew is using, or making sure your schedule is really pretty precise so people know where they need to show up, or sequences of work. Hey, you're doing the siding on this job today. Tomorrow you go over here. I mean, are those the kind of things you're talking about?
Exactly. So each employee typically has 5 to 6 categories or buckets of work. And inside that are tasks, okay? So let's just imagine an employee has, let's just say 5 or 6 buckets of these work, and then you are organizing the tasks inside each bucket. Now, on top of that, there's probably some what I would call key performance metrics that are the outcomes of that work, and you'll want to catch those somehow, right? And you'll also want to understand what's the priorities, what's the focus of the work, okay? So very often what happens is the employees don't know the full spectrum of their work in any detail, and they don't know what's the highest priority to get done. And that's where they get confused. This is a really important thing, particularly in a small human group up to 10 employees. Typically what happens, employees feel that they're stuck, scattered, overwhelmed, or frustrated. And if you break down the work and the understanding of what's going on inside that small group, that human group, you can begin to understand and diagnose what's really going on.
So with, for example, a contractor,
Yeah.
you could have 3 locations that you have 3 or 4 people on at once. It multiplies that problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, you also discovered there are ways to get from stages to the next stage. So from stage 1 to stage 2, if you don't do at least a lot of things right in stage 1, you can't make it to stage 2, right? You get stuck. Now, how many people are in stage 2?
Okay. Stage 2 is from 11 to 19 people.
So,
this is a really
so if
good
a
point.
business has 11 to 19 people, whether it's a hardware store or lumber or a contractor, doesn't matter, you face the same things getting into stage 2. So how do you make it into stage 2?
Well, first of all, what happens with a lot of companies and groups, human groups, they start having more work come in the door, and so they start throwing people at the work, right? And what happens is the organization becomes more complex. And so they didn't necessarily address all the rules when they were an earlier stage, and those rules come back to haunt them. And so very often what happens when a company grows into the next stage, and I think we'll probably be talking about this with Chad, when they grow into the next stage and they didn't attend to everything they needed to attend to back in the earlier stage, that is usually the primary causes of the problems and challenges they run into.
Okay, so if we grew, but we didn't organize the work,
Yep.
but we're still at 15 to 20 people, we're going to have major problems in stage 2. Now in stage 2, what do we have to perfect to get to stage 3?
Okay, stage 2, you got to figure out how to get supervisors handling some of the load, because the individual owner, president, or whoever's running the company, their span of control starts to get too far out.
There's too many people to get around to, right?
Yep.
It's like whack-a-mole. You just can't make it around all the time.
Right. And actually, Les, if we really get down to the bare bones of this whole thing, it's really about work and supervision. And you have to figure out the work, and you have to also figure out the supervision of the work. And where most companies get a little wacky in stage 2 is they haven't really figured out the supervision thing yet.
So maybe the owner is doing too much of the hands-on.
Yep.
And not working on the business enough, working in it. Now we're saving Chad here. We're going to talk to Chad, and the reason I'm saving him because when we go from stage 2 to stage 3, so how many people are we in stage 3?
Okay, so now remember, we're on stage 1 to 10, stage 2, 11 to 19, and then you're going to say, okay, well, why does it make any difference when you put that one more employee and make it a 20-person firm? It changes everything, and I'll go to that in a second. So stage 3 is 20 to 34 employees, okay? So when you add that one more person on top of the 19 that you currently have in stage 2, it makes you a stage 3 company, and everything changes. And this is one of the most difficult transitions for most entrepreneurs, to go from stage 2 to stage 3.
So what does the CEO have to do in stage 3? Now you're putting on a different hat again.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
What do they have to do?
Okay, so in stage 3, the CEO's span of control gets way out of line, okay? They have to delegate authority and responsibility. Easy to delegate responsibility, very much harder to delegate authority. And so what'll happen is they'll practice it in stage 2, hopefully, but they gotta have it down in stage 3, which means, Les, if you're working for me and I tell you you have responsibility to finish finishing off the construction of a wall, and then you run into some issue where the wood's not long enough or something, and you can't make any decisions, and you have to come back to me, or I give you the decision-making authority and you screw up, and then I say, okay, well, I can't give Les any authority anymore because he made a mistake. You got to get used to this. Again, goes back to supervision. You got to get used to delegating responsibility and authority. That's number 1 in stage 3. You have to get that figured out.
So delegation is the story in stage 3. So Chad's in now. If I'm right about this, so stage 3 was 20 to 35.
34.
34. So Chad, actually, you bought your company, right? So it was an ongoing enterprise. It had already been through those 2 I believe you bought it at a stage 3, right? Did you have?
It was kind of right on that line between the 2 and the 3. We went from this 15 to 19 people, and we got to 30. 33 people relatively quickly, and I worked just like y'all are talking about to not be doing in the business stuff, the day-to-day stuff, and that delegation thing, and got through that 20 pretty fast, but then have been kind of stuck at this 30 to 35.
Right, so you're in the delegation whole malaise here, trying to navigate that. When you first bought the company, there was an additional issue, which I want to bring out here, because Chad was in 3 locations. So how does that add complexity when not only do you have this delegation thing, but now you have 3 locations? What does that do to communication, to trying to navigate this stage?
Well, I'm sure Chad has his own perspective on it, but I would say that it makes it particularly more difficult. In stage 3, communication, if it wasn't nailed down in stage 2, if you hadn't figured it out, when you go to stage 3, the last thing that you want to have to fool with is being able to communicate to multiple locations if you haven't gotten it done earlier.
So how did that crop
and
up
that
for
was
you?
an issue that we absolutely faced. We had a main location, and then it's kind of like we had 2 other a couple people working at these locations, and they operated relatively autonomously. So it's like we had one company and then 2 other ones that were operating on their own rules and their own communication rules. So it's like we had stage 3 and then stage 1, stage 1.
Right, and that Chad, that's really a key point here, because if you're trying to scale a company, you have to have some consistent elements, i.e. you have to have your culture figured out. And you have to have processes that are duplicable, right? That you can duplicate them, and then you have to be able to have that connection, which is what Les was talking about earlier, is the communication between those 3 areas or 4 areas. If you don't bring together the key people in each of those locations at least once a week to have a sync, what I call a sync up, it makes it very difficult to manage, because whether even if their businesses are different or they're different departments, there still is overlap. They're still interacting with each other. They're still having interdependencies.
They need resources from each other,
Yeah, they need resources, and they need to communicate. And candidly, what has to happen in that meeting of those key people is they need to learn how the business works. They know how their department works, but they need to start to understand how the overall business works so they can begin to start handling more of their
So this isn't
responsibility.
unusual. I mean, again, if you go back to a contracting firm, there's 3 job sites, for instance, right? So now you got communication between the people that are dispersed. And so how do you have common systems and that good communication? Or, on the other hand, so a lot of our customers own lumberyards, hardware stores, and have multiple locations. And that is really a challenge when you've got people dispersed like that. So I know in our experience, you're talking about, boy, you really got to perfect this. Our company went from a stage 4 to a stage 5. And we candidly spent like 12 years in stage 5 because I didn't know how to get it right. And we went from the experts, the professional stage, where we got people who knew their functions,
Stage 4,
and they were really good in stage 4. But then you build those silos intentionally to get the professionalism. All of a sudden in stage 5, you got to integrate them so they're more interested across the company than they are in their own individual function. So I've experienced just cycling and not being able to grow in that stage. So it's really important to surmount the issues and the challenges in the stage that you're in. So now Chad said, well, look, we're in 3 locations. I'm really looking forward to getting in one location to solve that problem. Mm-hmm. So he did. Oddly enough, he bought the company, the building that we used to reside in. We didn't know that until he actually did it. But the unusual thing was, Chad bought the company. He also got something else. Tell us about that, Chad.
Well, I was looking for this building to move all under one roof, but found another manufacturing business that was in this building and agreed to acquire it at the same time. So I added another department. We merged everything all under one roof, and we go from about 33 people to almost 45 people overnight. But really, we went from 25 people in 2 other smaller groups, and we merged everything under one roof all of a sudden. And we started running into more people issues, more process issues. And I feel that we've just been on this hamster wheel going around and around. So I'm looking very forward to y'all telling me how to not do that.
So you automatically jump from stage 3 to stage 4 in numbers of people and complexity, mm-hmm. right? And now you have 2 businesses mm-hmm. where you were hoping to consolidate just one. How has the growth cycle been for you?
Roller coaster, hamster wheel. I think those are relatively good words to describe it there. And just like you spoke about, Les, you felt like you were stuck in a pattern for 12 years. I kind of feel that same thing, that we've been stuck in a pattern for about 10 years. We've had some success in places, but feel that we need some of these systems that a larger company requires, but I'm struggling to be able to find the resources to justify it and provide those resources to the team.
Yes, and so one of the things you mentioned to me is, you concentrate on one of the businesses and it grows, but the other one goes down. Mm-hmm. And you concentrate on this one now and it grows up. Mm-hmm. So it's a significant challenge then to get the cultures aligned and to move ahead as one company. And perhaps how much do you have to split in terms of the 2 different markets? Well, it's been a kind of a lively discussion here. What I do is refer you to James' book, actually, Navigating the Growth Curve. Get that wherever great books are sold. But if you want to know more about this, get this book because it's really rich material. And we're looking forward to our next episode talking about this, where we can talk about some new research that James has done on order and disorder. And we know that we've had a lot of disorder in our society from many, many angles. And how does a business navigate that issue itself? So thanks for watching Les's Corner. We'll see you next time.
Les's Corner with Les Burge.